All right, I am here. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that moment of panic there, as I had forgotten to plug the headphones and things in. Trust everybody is well this morning. We've got a show for you with some interesting stuff. Perhaps not quite as exciting news as some weeks, but I hope you'll find some of the stories interesting. It's Sunday, the 7th of March. The weather here in London for Elevenses is 119. It's a bit grey and overcast. It's not particularly warm outside, not exactly biking weather, which is just as well as we're still not allowed to go biking, but it's coming soon. So what have we got today then? Bunnies on bikes to support the NHS mental health charity. An interesting one from Germany on a lower speed limit that's been introduced for motorcycles only on one particular road. A new startup called Nimbus is touting an unbelievably cheap cabin three-wheeler. Shed One is the build-it-yourself utility bike project that you put together in your own shed. And a question from Sue this morning: do better brakes stop modern bikes faster? So that's what I'll be looking at this morning for you, Sue, who's just said good morning. Clive, Nigel and Tony are all here saying hello. Good morning to you guys. Settle yourself down for the next 25 minutes or so for some topical news, possibly controversial views, and better biking tip. And don't forget, you can always catch up with the show if you miss it, or head over to the YouTube channel Survival Skills UK. Right, okay, so first story. At a time when Rishi Sunak's budget is under fire for its lack of support for both NHS staff and the NHS itself, a group of bikers are doing their bit to raise awareness for the Raise charity. Now, Raise is aiming to improve well-being and experience and welfare generally of not only the NHS patients but also the staff who, as you've probably realised, have been under extreme pressure for the last 12 months. The latest Raise a Rainbow campaign hopes to provide support and spaces of sanctuary specifically for staff. So on the 1st of May, a group of riders from the Decorum area, that's St Albans way if you're not into your Roman names, will be delivering gifts to West Hertfordshire hospitals, the Watford General Hospital and the Hemel Hempstead Hospital. And Decorum motorcycle riders are planning to make the journey as bunnies on bikes, so I have a strong suspicion that may mean some fancy dress. And that'll be on May the 1st. And they'll be starting from the Monks Inn pub in the square in Marlows. And that'll be where people can drop off gifts to be delivered. Now, the group had planned to be out donating patients, 2 gifts to patients in hospital at Christmas, but of course the pandemic restrictions put a paid to that ride, so it had to be cancelled. Instead, what happened then was that the hospital's own charity team collected the donations and took them back to those hospitals. And John Andrews, speaking on behalf of Decorum motorcycle riders, said, "I want to raise awareness of what we're doing to support Raise a Rainbow. We're still going ahead with the bunnies on bikes, but it'll be a bit later than planned. Obviously, Easter is actually the beginning of April. The Decorum motorcycle riders team, Shelley McClellan, Gavin King and myself have talked about the date, and we think it's better if we do bunnies on bikes on May the 1st. So hats off to you guys. Excellent idea, and I hope that all goes well for you. You have a nice day out in your bunny outfits. Right, now moving on to the second piece for the morning. Speed limits. Funnily enough, there was a bit of a debate about speed limits and blanket 50s on my Thursday video, the 60-second safety video. If you watch that and have a look down in the comments, that was and what I was talking about there was how harmonizing speed limits between vehicles actually makes life a bit safer, because what it stops is overtaking. Now, if you recall back in sort of 7 or 8 years ago, I think it was now, the speed limit for HGVs on A roads was raised from 40 to 50, which obviously reduced the speed gap between a 40 mile per hour HGV and a 60 mile per hour car or motorcycle. At the same time, a considerable number of the A routes, which carried a lot of lorry traffic, had their speed limits effectively lowered to 50. So in other words, everything should have been moving at the same speed, reducing accidents, reducing overtaking accidents, certainly. And the statistics do seem to find in that favour. Most people don't really notice a drop of 10 miles per hour in speed. So it doesn't actually cause a great deal of frustration, and at least not until you get on a motorbike on an empty stretch, and then of course you just catch the next bunch of vehicles up. But anyway, over to Germany. We're looking at a stretch of road between Steinenbronn and Echterdingen. Now, that's in the district of Esslingen in Baden-Württemberg, which you'll find about 10 kilometers south of Stuttgart. Now, it's not an area I actually know well, but I have been down there on occasion. And what's happened is that they have decided to put in a 50 kph speed limit for motorcycles. That's about 30 miles an hour, whilst motor cars can continue to drive at the standard out of town speed limit, which is 100 kph, which is 62 miles an hour as near as damn it. Now, apparently this is a winding forest road. I haven't actually been out to sort of Google map it, but the reduced limit is there to reduce the number of bike crashes. So what you'll see is that the exact opposite of what I've just talked about what's happening on UK roads. It seems to be a one-off measure. I haven't seen anything to say that it's in use anywhere else, but it was apparently discussed at length in the civic offices in the area. Now, pay attention, because the logic here is somewhat complex. Now, until 7 or 8 years ago, the speed limit on that road was 50 kph for all vehicles, so it had a 30 mile per hour limit basically on the whole stretch for everything. But what they said was that this low speed limit actually gave drivers something of a false sense of security. Because they were driving very, very slowly, what they felt was that they were able to get round bends quite comfortably at that low speed. And that led to a series of accidents where drivers were basically caught out, sort of not really aware of the bends, and basically being caught by surprise by a bend that they should have been able to get around quite easily at the speed limit. So what they did was actually removed the speed limit signs, and they raised the speed limit back to the full-on 100 kph for this twisty stretch where the problems occur. And the idea was that by taking the speed limit away, you then forced the driver to adapt to each particular bend and sort their speed out to a safe speed for that corner. Because although the speed limit is set at 100 kph, the spokesperson was said as saying that on those snaking bends, that speed was actually a totally illusory limit. So okay, so understand what they did. They took away a lower speed limit to increase driver alertness and reduce crashes. Now, so far, so good. But as far as I understand it from the slightly garbled translation, they then found that on one short stretch of the road, and I think it seems to be one specific corner, they had a disproportionate number of motorcycle accidents. And motorcyclists had a real problem on this bend, repeatedly misjudging this corner and crashing on it. So what interventions have been tried? Well, some months ago, they installed additional red warning arrows. So basically the equivalent of our black and white chevrons. And they are intended to make the curve more obvious to the rider from a distance so that the rider can then adjust speed and get the speed down. Deputy Leader Jutta Rösler says that the bend really stands out now, but that more intervention was needed to prevent bike crashes. And so they got a consultation together. They got a police motorcyclist to talk to them about the corner, and they decided to impose that lower limit exclusively for motorcycles. And she said, in the balance of all the pros and cons, it seemed to us to be the right thing to do. We think it's a reasonable solution. Now, predictably, riders groups locally disagree. They're up in arms, claiming that the lower speed limit for motorcycles puts those bikers at risk from following cars that aren't aware why the rider is slowing down. Rösler disagrees and argues that the natural speed limit that is set by the bend itself ensures that there will be no danger to motorcycles as they slow for the speed limit, because the motorists themselves will be slowing down for the corner. And she said anyway that the maximum speed is only valid under favourable conditions anyway. Presumably she means by that the 50 kph posted for the bend, not the 100 kph, which is the road limit. So this local report on what seems a rather bizarre measure concludes that it remains to be seen whether motorcyclists will actually comply with the speed limit in the future, and whether the number of accidents will decrease. But it is certainly an interesting intervention aimed specifically at motorcycles there, and it does actually flag up the problem that we have with bikes, is that we fall off the damn things. Right, okay. That story was shared to me, and for the moment I've just forgotten who shared it, so I can't give them a credit. I'll do it in the comments after the event. Right, now, okay, now the next thing I forgot to do was set up my screen share. Okay, window, here we go. Right, Nimbus is the latest business that you've probably never heard of, and I'll just shrink that down again for a moment. They are entering the personal mobility market, and they have locations in Ann Arbor, which is Michigan, I believe, San Carlos, California, and Guangdong, which is not in the United States at all, but China. And the Nimbus is apparently the not just the non-motorcycle you've been looking for, but also the future of urban mobility. And it's being sold in two ways. First of all, it's being sold as environmentally friendly. The website notes that whilst electric cars that charge with electricity from clean power plants can reduce carbon to a third over similar gasoline cars, that's not enough to meet global targets reducing emissions. And then the website goes on to say that in effect the answer is the motorcycle, and they argue that the motorcycle takes up a quarter of the road space of a car, but basically because it's that much smaller, it means a road can carry up to 10 times the traffic if it's all motorcycles than it can if it's all cars. So basically you can pack a lot of motorcycles in a relatively small space and carry a lot of people, particularly when they're one person per vehicle. And the designer notes that the smallest width that you can make a conventional lightweight vehicle is about 1.2 meters with 4 wheels, or 1.5 meters with 3 wheels, and that's basically to stop the thing tipping over. And he says that that's not enough, narrow enough to filter, and in fact not substantially narrower than the small car. Well, that's not surprising, because pretty much the same design constraints apply. You have to stop the thing tipping over when you corner. So the answer is what you see on the screen before you, and I'll just blow it up a little bit. It's a tilting design, and this is being touted as a transportation alternative to conventional cars, solving traffic and pollution pains at a stroke. And the way it maintains its balance is by leaning. Okay, so it's 81 centimeters or 32 inches wide, which isn't much wider than a conventional motorcycle, and half the width of a Smart. It's also 2.3 meters long, which is not much longer than the average bike, and it seats literally, as you'll see in a moment with the inside shot, 2 people. You're sold stress-free parking. You're promised parking spots in Nimbus-only zones, access to, of course, via the Inevitable app. And it's also said that it can fit in spots made for motorcycles, which is absolutely guaranteed to hack off bike owners, because narrow though it may be, it's still a lot wider than a motorcycle. If you park 2 of those together, you probably get 3 bikes in where you can get 2 of those fitted. But the big selling point is its attractiveness to drivers via what is called Nimbus Balance. And they say this is a proprietary technology that allows our narrow vehicle to maintain its stability. And this is where the marketing hype gets a little bit confusing, because the system has, quote, a direct mechanical connection between the steering wheel and the steering action of the vehicle. Okay, now that sounds like a motorcycle to me. It will lean into corners, providing an exhilarating sensation. Well, that sounds like a motorcycle to me. And it naturally returns the vehicle to the upright angle, which sounds like a motorcycle to me. And shortly after driving it, it will feel completely natural and intuitive, just like a, well, you get the picture. So really, it's a tilting 3-wheeled cabin motorcycle. And I suspect that under the skin, you'll find a tilting front end, not unlike that already developed by Piaggio, Gilera and Yamaha. And there is one other entrant in the market, which I'll come on to in just a moment. Now, cabin motorcycles on 2 wheels have been around for decades. You may remember the Tracer and the Ecomobile going back even further. What makes it different, however, is this claim that presumably keep the motorcycle phobic happy, that we have a motorcycle as nimble as a motorbike, but without needing the skills to drive one. So if you have a look, you'll see what appears to be a steering wheel. It appears to have a sort of car-style seat, which clearly adjusts. There's a little lever there if you look very closely. There are pedals on the floor as well, so that will be the accelerator and the brakes. And the big question then, so does it counter steer? If it does, it's definitely a motorcycle. But if you really do turn the wheel to go left, then you're actually looking at quite a complex system of actually sorting the bike's mobility and balance out. And that would explain why the blurb also says that it has a actuators and sensors and control systems, which, again, quote, keep tabs on every function of the vehicle, calibrating thousands of times a second to make driving easy and intuitive. Now, if that's the case, again, it's not entirely new, because that is Toyota. It's the Toyota iRoad, and that was developed back in the about 2013, at least that's when it made its first appearance at a motor show. And the iRoad is powered via 2 motors driving the front wheels, but the leaning system is completely independent. It has yet another electric motor, and they control the steering angle, the speed of lean, and there's a gyroscope in there as well to help the thing balance. And the controlled electrics can raise or lower the 2 front wheels independently, and there's a gear set and a yoke integrated into the front suspension to allow you to steer it. So basically, there you have a completely independent from the steering wheel system of steering the front wheels. So the iRoad's active lean system, as it's called, completely automatic, and it's reported to feel surprisingly normal when you actually drive it if you're used to a car. So it is likely that the Nimbus could use something along those lines, but if it does, then it contradicts the claim that there is a direct mechanical connection between the steering wheel and the steering action, because clearly if there's lots of electronics and stuff going on, then it isn't a direct connection. Anyway, put that puzzle to one side, and the what you find is that you get a bag full of car type goodies in the Nimbus. You get heating, you get optional aircon, there's an infotainment system with speakers, there's an optional screen for you to operate all this from. Safety features are ABS and traction control. You get automated emergency braking, lane departure warning, automated parking, for heaven's sake, and also over-the-air updates to the vehicle intelligence and the balance system. So all that puts it far in advance, technically, of a conventional motorcycle, which is fair enough. But of course, it also comes with a rather unmotorcycle-like weight. It's around about the 300 kilo mark, depending on what add-on bits you've got in it, which tops the scales at 660 pounds if you think in old money, which is fairly weighty. That's around 200 pounds more than best part 100 kilos more than a conventional sort of motorcycle. The drivetrain looks like it's powered by a hub rear motor. Doesn't actually say that, but that would basically be very similar to what's found on many scooters already, and that would account for the fairly sluggish 0 to 30 time, which is nudging 3 seconds, and that makes me wonder why you need traction control on it, frankly. The base model does offer a top speed of around 50 miles per hour. You can charge it overnight from the standard socket, or there's the level 3 fast charger built in, which gives you a charge in under an hour, and you get a range of about 70 odd city miles, so it's enough to go back and forwards to work a couple of times probably, and the claimed equivalent with current electric prices is about 370 mpg. Okay, leaving aside the question mark over just how it steers, everything else is credible right up to the point where I read that orders are being taken now for $100 deposit, with delivery promised for mid-2022, depending on pre-orders. And this is the really interesting bit. The base model is being offered at just $6,420. That's astonishingly low. You can also rent it for just $99 a month. Now, I'm kind of wondering how on earth a US-Chinese startup can put such a technologically and well-equipped vehicle on the road, particularly if it's got that Toyota-style active steering system up front, and for less than the price of CB500, basically. The answer that on the website that because it's very, very light, they can save on everything else. They can make motors, electronics, and batteries all smaller. Well, yes and no. They're pushing a lot more weight than an electric scooter. You might not be pushing as much weight as a sort of a smart car, but it's still a weighty vehicle. Even sourcing everything from China and building that low performance vehicle it still seems an unlikely price point to me. If you look at the CF Moto MT650, which is a conventional sort of motorcycle built in China, the price is virtually the same. What is a bit of a clue is that there is a high performance X model also on the cards, and this has a 90 mile per hour top speed and acceleration 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, so much quicker than the one I've just looked at. Plus you get a 200 mile city range with an enhanced battery, and you get extra airbags, and the weight goes up to 342 kilos, so that's 750 pounds, so almost 100 pounds more heavy. And the price goes up too, to something rather more realistic, in my opinion, $19,400. So either the base model is a loss leader and designed to get people to order the more performance-oriented model, or it'll never happen, or it'll suddenly go up when it's time to deliver, or you may just get an opening batch put on the market, which are relatively inexpensive. Right, okay, so that's quite an interesting story actually on that one. Don't forget, you're tuned to Elevenses here with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. I meant to put that particular banner up because that's the one that tells you where you can catch up, either here on Facebook, or you can head over to my YouTube channel. Don't forget that all important UK at the end of Survival Skills though, and you can always catch up on my coffee page as well. So right, what's next then? Well, the next thing to look at is a new British bike. Now, you remember the cake. I can't believe, but it was back in May last year that I actually talked about this Swedish company, which had just begun deliveries of a sort of what they described as a utility bike built on a sort of workbench modular concept. And the idea was that you got a sort of literally a platform with a seat and handlebars on it, and you could clamp on various gadgets and add-ons, racks, baskets, tool carriers, you name it, they've got it. And essentially you modified the bike to fit your needs at the moment. Starting prices were fairly hefty, $6,500 for the moped equivalent model, or $8,500 for the 125 equivalent. I thought at the time that it was a great idea. It didn't take other companies long to see the benefits of this modular approach to building a utility bike. So have a look at this one. This is the Shed 1. Get the picture up again. There we go. That's the fully built up road legal version with all the bells and whistles, including lights, obviously, mirrors, and you'll also notice it has an instrument panel, which is actually a repurposed mobile phone. It's sort of, you use an app and Bluetooth, presumably, to the vehicle, and you get your data on your phone. So it's all road legal. The bike can be delivered as a ready-to-ride model, although there seems to be a limited edition of these built that way, or you get a completely knocked-down kit, which you can build up for yourself, and that goes around what they call the Shed 1 core. That's it. Basically, it's a frame with a battery. The motor is built into the back. You've got a seat. You've got all the control units and bits and pieces that you need. All you actually have to do with that, when I say all, is source your own suspension and brakes and handlebars and that kind of thing. And then you plug it all in, and then you've got your bike. So Andy Trainer of Shed Rides said, from the outset, we decided that a short-range utility motorcycle with a top speed of over 50 miles per hour that evolves the tradition of motorcyclists customizing and maintaining their own motorcycles is where we wanted to be. The Shed 1 is the perfect commuter or utility motorbike, easily adapted to your specific personal or business purpose. Well, okay, all right, leaving aside the hyperbole. The site has a series of concepts sketches suggesting how you might want to customize your own Shed 1. The one on the right there is a fishing tackle equipped bike, which looks weird enough with its little fold down seat at the back. And I'm really not sure what you would carry on the low loader on the left. No prices mentioned on the website, but an article on the bikes suggested £10,000 for the ready-to-roll version, which I have to say does seem a wee bit pricey. All right, okay, how are we doing? Oh, we're running out of time actually already. Now, over to the final better biking piece of the day. Now, this is a question that Sue asked last night. She said, I remembered what I wanted to ask about the updated highway code. I noticed stopping distances are the same as they always were. So can I understand that thinking distances would remain the same as ever, but braking distance? Surely brakes are better now. Interested in your thoughts. Well, it's a very good question, and it's one I've addressed on quite a few occasions over the years. And the answer is, of course, it depends. Now, the highway code has always talked about braking and thinking distance. I was going to put a graphic up for this, and I seem to have forgotten. Oh, well, never mind. The thinking distance is always the short one, and it's the braking distance is the one that grows. Now, let's just start from the opposite end and start with what happens when you've actually squeezed the brakes and the bike comes to a halt. Now, this is actually better thought about as a sort of a mechanical stopping distance, because once you've got your tug on the brake lever or hit the foot brake in a car, then the brakes are engaged, and the stopping distance relates precisely to two things, or three things, I should say. The performance of your stopping, your braking system, and your tyres against the road surface. So the first question is, how good are your brakes? Well, there is an issue here because in an emergency on a motorcycle, most motorcycles never get beyond about 60 to 70% of the performance that their brakes could achieve. Now, if you've bought anything in the last 10 years or so, it's almost certainly got ABS on it. So we actually ought to be able to brake hard enough to activate the ABS. We will stop slightly slower if we trigger the ABS and if we brake right on the very cusp of triggering it, but not quite getting it to trip. But if we haven't got ABS, then we have to learn to brake hard enough to detect the beginning of a front wheel slide. If we do what most riders do, which is stay well away from the limits of the brakes, then we are not going to stop the bike as quickly as possible, even with the improved braking systems. We'll probably improve on the performance of a sort of 1950s Triumph or something, but not nearly as much as we might expect. Okay, second problem is that the brakes only ever work as well as the road surface grips the tyres, not the other way around, tyres gripping the road. Forget that. Think about the road surface, because it's the road surface that determines whether or not your tyres will work. You can have the best tyres ever on your motorcycle and you will have no more grip than something running a 50-year-old classic bike tyre if the road surface is slick. So we have to be aware how the road surface influences our stopping as well. And the third thing is, we also have to recall that as we increase speed, we increase our stopping distance, and it's not a linear sum. If we double our speed, then our stopping distance is now 4 times what it was. It works the other way, of course. If we halve our speed, then our stopping distance is a quarter of what it was a moment earlier. So losing some speed actually really does improve our stopping distance. But the danger is that because we have better bikes these days, we ride faster, and that we still need to stop. The physics of stopping a particular mass doesn't change. Even if the brakes are better, we still have the physics to deal with, and if we increase speed, it double our speed, we quadruple our stopping distance. So we still have to deal with that, even if our brakes are better. And if we, as I say, if we use our extra performance of the bike to increase our speed, then we probably have taken away any benefit we get from braking over a shorter distance from better brakes. Right, okay. So that's the first thing. We need to learn to be able to use our brakes hard, and we need to recognize the mechanical limits of the road and tyre, and we need to remember not to ride faster into hazardous situations relying on our brakes to pull us up. Okay, now the second point is that so-called reaction time that is there in the highway code. The thing that is what constitutes the biggest problem with the way the highway code talks about stopping, because this reaction time is the moment we realize we have to react to the moment we start to squeeze the lever. So basically it's from there to there, and typically for a human that time is something between 0.5 of a second to 0.7 of a second. So it's a pretty quick reaction, but it's the understanding of what that refers to, which is where the highway code leaves us missing a vital chunk of information. That reaction time refers to an alert driver, what they refer to as an alert driver. But it's not an alert driver, it's actually a driver who knows exactly what's coming next and what they're going to have to do. They are two very, very different states. So this thinking time is about right if the driver is already expecting to perform a particular action. Remember your driving test in the car. You were stopped. The examiner told you that they were going to tap the dashboard with their clipboard, and they wanted you to perform a stop as if in an emergency. So you know exactly what is going to happen and when. The only question is actually how soon after you set off again the driving instructor actually hits the dashboard. In my driving test, it was actually about 10 minutes later, which I'd kind of already forgotten about that. But anyway, so we're actually expecting that response. We're actually expecting to have to perform. So yeah, it could be the examiner hitting the dashboard, but it could be seeing the bouncing ball coming out into the road and realizing that could be followed by the small child. It's the hackneyed old driving instructor's example, but it's entirely relevant. But that 0.5 to 0.7 thinking time is absolutely inaccurate if something happens that's outside the rider's expectations. By definition, we cannot be alert to an unexpected event. So what we have to do is we have to add in a third delay. And this is what I call recognition time. And if you go back through my writings, you'll find I talk about this quite a lot. So this is the cognitive delay that happens while we actually process what's happening in front of us through our eyes or ears or whatever else, our senses generally, process it, work out what it is we are actually detecting, and then come up with a plan to deal with it. It could be as simple, as I say, as being completely surprised when something like a deer runs out in front of us. We have to see that deer, realize that it's a hazard, decide that stopping is the better option and not swerving, and then we move into that reaction time as we actually go for the brakes and squeeze them that I was talking about. Now, the problem is that this cognitive delay caused by surprise, which again you'll know that I talk about a lot, is long. It's anything from 1 second to 3 seconds, and at 30 miles an hour, an additional 13 to 39 meters on our stopping distance. 39 meters to add to those 23 meters that the highway code talks about. You can easily bust 23 meters on which is the standard highway code stopping distance on a modern bike, if you're alert and if you brake anything close to the maximum performance of the bike. But if you're not expecting something to go wrong, you now have to add in that extra 1 to 3 seconds. And this explains why so many riders fail to achieve that incredibly easy to achieve 23 meter stopping distance on the back cover of the highway code. Okay, what are the solutions to this? Well, first of all, practice braking till you can trigger the ABS. Don't be afraid of it. The whole point of ABS is it's going to keep the bike upright when you trigger it, but if you don't trigger it, you don't know how hard you can brake. If you have an older non-ABS brake, you can learn to brake to the point where the front wheel is starting to slide, or you can more likely, you'll find with a typical sort of sporty style bike, if I remember right, Sue is riding a speed triple, you'll lift the rear wheel on a bike like that on a half decent surface without any problem at all. You just have to be careful not to loop it, of course. The second thing you have to do is go out there with my jaundiced approach to riding, where you expect things to go wrong rather than go right. You look at a junction, you expect a car to pull out. You look at a bend, you expect it to get tighter. You look at a bit of hedge, you expect an animal to run out in front of you. When it doesn't, everything is hunky-dory and you're very happy about it. When it does happen, and you're even happier because you react a damn sight faster. And if you genuinely see what you think is a potentially risky situation, then the simple answer is ease off the gas and lose some speed before you need the brakes, because then you will be shrinking that stopping distance and you will pull up in a short time. So remember, what the highway code tells you about stopping distances is only 2 of the 3 elements, and the one it forgets is the recognition time from the moment the hazard uncloaks to the moment you realize you'd better do something about it and actually start squeezing the brakes. As I say, many police accidents reconstructions find that the vehicle could have stopped easily in the distance that was available. The operator simply failed to do anything meaningful in time. All right, okay, so that brings us to the end of today's broadcast. Don't forget, you can support me over on my Ko-fi page, Ko-fi I forgot what it is now already. Here it is. It's this one here. And you can get my biking articles, the back catalogue from Facebook, with lots more technical tips like the ones I've just given you. Don't forget, I'm also helping out less confident riders with my short series of webinars on Friday to help people get ready to be out on the road again. Already people are scoffing about the need to do that, but some people will be a little bit more sensible and be thinking about what they actually need to do to prepare. Anything else I want to say? The newsletter is also available to you, which allows you to avoid having to search through my Facebook page to find what I'm writing about. And last but not least, I am opening up. Where's it gone? Typical. I had it somewhere and I've lost. There it is. Go back to that one. On-road courses. I am resuming on-road training on the 29th of March. That's basically the Bike Safe is starting up the following weekend, which is the first available weekend after that. So I think I'm justified in starting up. So you can get a booking online already, and you can certainly go on the waiting list if that's a bit too far off for you to organise for yourself. I'm still doing online coaching as well, so have a look for that. And that is pretty much it for today. If you've got any questions about the topic I've just covered, do drop me a line, and stay safe, and I'll see you next Wednesday, I trust. Bye for now.